Hello, Nav Cavale here, plastic surgeon. Welcome to the Real Clinic podcast, sponsored by 42 South Films. This is where we take a behind-the-scenes look at the surgery industry, get to meet key players in the business, learn about setting up a clinic such as Real, and meet some of the best surgeons around. Welcome to the Real Clinic podcast. My name's Nav Cavale, I'm a plastic surgeon, and today we're going to be talking to Gary Monaghan, founder of the Clinic Builders. Gary helped us build this place that I'm sitting in at the moment with Gary, which is the Real Clinic in Battersea, and we were one of the earlier projects that Gary was involved with of this scale. So I'm hoping to chat to Gary about, first of all, his story in terms of his career development and how he ended up helping someone like me build a clinic like this. So yeah, thank you, Gary, for
Pleasure.
joining us. I've known you for a long time,
Yes.
But more recently I kind of know you as the guy that, built this place
Yes.
with us. And so it's good to have you back. This is kind of, I don't know, you haven't been here for a while. So it's
A couple of years. It's nice to be back.
Yeah.
We're on the place
So
again.
we're actually in the operating theatre.
Theatre,
Which is the ophthalmology operating theatre here at Real Clinic.
yeah.
And actually, you were the very first patient.
I was. Yes,
Yeah.
I was in this
Yeah.
theatre.
Exactly.
I was.
I think
yes.
I nipped a little bit off your nose.
And the nose has been fine ever since.
Which I was convinced was something nasty. I think I got you all worried about it. But thank you. I guess what we're trying to do with this podcast is get people in the industry. So I'll be talking to other colleagues who are
Yeah.
plastic surgeons. We'll be talking to other surgeons. We'll be talking to people that run hospitals. We'll have people like yourself who are part of the setup side. We'll not only have clinicians, we'll have logistics, we'll have operational.
Yeah.
We won't just have doctors. I hope we'll have nurses, we'll have other allied specialists,
Yeah.
as well as people involved with the other sides to the business of, say, plastic surgery, as well as all the other stuff we cover here at Real. So we're hoping to do some stuff on marketing, publicity, and so forth in due course. But you actually, I think it's really good having you here because you were kind of where it all started.
Yeah.
But before we come on to that, which I'd like to talk about, because I think it'd be good for discussing how we did this, because I think we were one of the first kind of big projects that
I
you
think
did.
that's fair to say, yeah.
But before we do that, if it's all right with you, can I just get you to tell me a bit about yourself? Because I've known you for a long time.
course.
I knew you before you were a clinic builder.
Yep.
I've known you working for implant companies and things like that. So
That's right.
tell us a bit about yourself, starting right wherever you want to start, really.
Oof, well, my degree was law, which was a fantastic degree to do, but was never really my pathway forevermore. I think I probably met too many lawyers along the way, and that's what put me off. So I always thought I wanted to go into a bit more of a customer-facing environment, and I ended up getting on a graduate program into retail.
Yep.
And I spent about 8 years in retail, various companies, Habitat, the Walt Disney Company, which was amazing. But I wanted to do sales. I sort of realised that sales was where I wanted to be, and I always thought medical sales was my sort of holy grail at that point. I'm probably in my mid to late 20s at this point. So I got lucky. I got into medical sales with a company called Terumo that was infusion pumps, cardiac equipment, and so on. And by chance meeting at one of the exhibitions I was doing, I met the two guys that at the time were running Nagor. They were on the stand next to us.
Nagor breast implants.
Nagor breast implants, indeed. We got chatting. They had a position. They wrote me an offer on a serviette, which I think I've still got somewhere. And I just really fancied the environment. I fancied plastics. It was an interesting product. It was a UK company as well. Yeah. And I jumped, and that was my first sort of foray, if you wish, into plastic surgery.
Are we allowed to know how long ago that was?
We are. That was in 1998.
Okay. I just qualified as a doctor a few years. 95 is when I qualified as a doctor.
Right.
So I was still a baby doctor then.
I am conscious that I've been in this industry, and I've seen a lot of people that are now very senior surgeons like yourself qualify, get the first consultant job, and progress, as it were. Yeah. And I've sort of been on that journey in terms of knowing them with a number of surgeons that are now obviously very senior, which is great.
So I guess it's fair to say you've been doing plastic surgery as long as I have.
Probably in a different way, but yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You wouldn't want me doing your face. I was 9 years with Nagor, 10 years with Nagor. And then I left Nagor, potentially because I felt I'd done everything I could with Nagor. I was very, very lucky with Nagor. They were a wonderful company to work for. It was a family business for most of the time I was there before it sold. I designed a range of implants, which was in Pleo. I did international for a couple of years, which was amazing. So lots of different countries and how they work, and ran the UK sales team for a number of years. So I felt I'd probably gone as far as I could.
When you say designed the Impleo implants, what do you mean by that?
I mean, you could say I just did that.
Yeah.
And the concept behind Impleo was we were aware that surgeons sized in one of generally two ways. It was either base measurement or volume. And there was inconsistencies in the range. So a surgeon couldn't say, right, I'll go for that profile and I know there's going to be a 10.5 centimetre base measurement within the range. So I went to South America for the Brazilian meeting, which was in Rio. And I had lots of discussions with surgeons down there who asked that question. Why can't there be consistency in the range of base and volume?
Yeah.
And the third criteria which defines a measurement is of course, the projection. And I didn't really have the answer. So I sat on the plane on the way back and thought, I honestly think this can be done. The other thing that the South American surgeons were saying was they wanted, and I always remember this phrase because it stuck with me forever, an Argentinian surgeon, a chap called Dr. Moretti, he came up to me and he looked at the extra high profile that we had on the stand and sort of poked it and went, this is very low. And I said, that's as high as we have. And he said, down here we like a missile. And I always remember that. So another thing that Impleo was conceived to do was to have a fully filled implant with a slightly firmer gel that retained its shape so it didn't settle, because implants generally settle by some degree, some percentage once they're made. So all those sort of elements together, I sat with R&D at Nagor and said, this is what we want to achieve. Can we do it? The good thing about Nagor, it's a very flat structure, so you were able to sit with the people that were literally making the decisions. You didn't have to go through levels of management forevermore. So it got moving probably as quick as any project potentially could, given all the rules and regulations that govern an implantable
It's
product.
interesting, actually, because they're probably one of the companies I'm now looking at.
Is that right?
But not because they're high profile, it's the opposite, actually.
Yeah.
I go for base width, which is the diameter of the implant.
Yes.
And then depending on the volume, I select a profile. So the profile is the last thing I think about these days, whereas it used to be a lot more sort of...
It's interesting how all surgeons are different.
So it's all kind of seems to be changing a little bit now. I think we might, and especially with implants being softer and so
Indeed.
forth. But anyway, that's so following on from Nagor.
Insurance. I went from being in a very theatre-based environment, stood next to a surgeon talking about a product, to selling a bit of paper, an important bit of paper, because you have to have it. It's the law. It's under GMC regulations and everything else. But a very different product, a very different sell, really. And I founded a company called Premium Medical Protection with a business partner of mine. It broke the mold. It was the first probably major challenger to the defence organisations. And we literally went from stuffing envelopes on a kitchen table to several thousand clients. And it still thrives today. I miss the direct environment, it's fair to say. So I sold my interest in PMP in 2015. I still do a lot of insurance because I was 6 years doing it, and I still get a lot of people ring me up and say, can you help me with this? And we still have a lot of clinics and surgeons on our books, but it's not through PMP anymore. And I went into business consultancy because a lot of surgeons it's almost a fluke in a way that they're really business savvy, because you're not trained in that direction. It's like you spend years and years and years and years on the clinical side, but nobody actually trains you to be a good businessman or good at marketing or how to build a practice. Well, a lot of it is anecdotal. It can be quite a competitive environment, so it's not always the case that your colleagues will give you a leg up, and in some cases quite the opposite. So I was asked to do some business consultancy by a few surgeons. So I started doing that, and that led me to one particular surgeon whose goal was to have his own clinic. And I quite honestly said, sounds great, but I have no idea how to do this. He said, well, let's just see how we get on, see if we can do it
And
together.
if you're happy saying who it is, you
Of course.
don't go away. Feel free.
Of course, yeah, that was Patrick Malucci.
Yeah.
And his was the first one that we were involved with. We made a few mistakes along the way, but frankly, it turned out probably a lot better than I thought it was going to do at the very start. He's got an absolutely beautiful place now, which he still has, and he's expanded it now as well. That was in South Kensington, the first one. And we were very proud of it.
Yeah.
Patrick's very high profile. He's a pioneer in many ways. And a lot of people looked at it and said, oh, God, we'd love this. How did you do this?
Yeah, I want one of those.
And to be fair to Patrick, he just went, go and talk to him.
Yeah.
So we started getting a few inquiries that way. And I'm never going to claim it was a light bulb moment. It wasn't. We almost fell into the niche that we are now in.
Yeah.
And it was probably 20-25% of what I was doing at the time, maybe a bit more.
And when are we talking now?
That was about 2017, I think it was. 2018, I think it was. No, it's definitely 2017. It was. And we started getting more inquiries, and we started realising that plastic surgeons were getting more and more, in particular plastic surgeons, were getting more and more squeezed, more and more pushed out, if you wish, of the private hospital sector. And then, of course, we hit COVID.
Yeah.
And all COVID has done is just completely exacerbated the whole situation. Yeah. So we found ourselves in the right place at the right time. And
I mean,
pretty much all we do now.
Because I think if you're being cynical, which I'll be the cynical one here today, plastic surgeons have always felt that the larger private hospitals are too big to do cosmetic surgery, say, or simple plastic surgical procedures. Because our patients tend to be young, fit, healthy. They don't need to stay in hospital. They're not necessarily having big operations.
Yep.
So actually, they don't make much money for the hospital because the patients are not staying in.
Yeah, it's true.
Using the facilities.
Exactly.
They're not having blood tests or blood transfusions. They're not going to intensive care.
Yep.
They're not having physiotherapy and rehab. They're not eating the expensive meals that the big fancy hospitals, prepare and so forth. So they're not great value for money as far as the big hospitals are concerned. So we've never really managed to crack those as a specialty.
Yeah.
And then you've got the sort of medium-sized hospitals, and I've always sort of seen them as being a bit like the middle classes. They're kind of always looking for something better and perhaps looking down at some of the dodgier hospitals which have also existed, which we can come on to. And so COVID almost was a good excuse for these middle hospitals where plastic surgeons have traditionally lived to get squeezed out.
Yep.
And actually the natural progression from that, I guess, is places like Pat Malucci's clinic or the Cadogan clinic.
Yep.
And that's where I learnt about this kind of setup.
Yeah.
And COVID properly, I think, made it something that seemed like every plastic surgeon should be doing. I almost now, having done this place, and this is very much based on what I learned at Cadogan Clinic, for which I've got to say I'm eternally grateful. I really am. And then it was such an eye-opening experience to see how you can do something in a smallish hospital or small hospital, and therefore go ahead and build another small hospital, which is what we've done here. And so you then went on from Pat Malucci's place. I think you built Ahmed Ali Khan's.
We did, yes, up in the northeast.
Yeah.
Yes. And then we just started getting inquiries.
Yeah.
We've done, to some degree of involvement, probably about 13, 14 now.
Yeah.
The largest one being Fulvio Ursabayada's over in Boreham Wood.
Yep.
We were involved with the Quabbers place in Edinburgh.
Yep.
A smaller one in Birmingham. There's a lot in the pipeline as well, because I think we've noticed more and more that it's now not just plastics that are looking at doing this, because people are actually looking at the NHS as a potential patient stream for these venues now. Yeah. Let's grab some of the NHS waiting list, and I think they say even guaranteed 5 years worth of work in that.
Yep.
And then who knows where it will go from there. Probably more people on self-pay, more people on insured. And
I mean, that's the problem. COVID meant that the waiting lists have shot up.
Yeah.
And a lot of all I do in the NHS is non-urgent elective plastic surgery these days. And my patients are what they're called priority 4. They can wait forever, in theory, to have their, it's not a life-threatening situation.
Yeah.
So it's not like cancer or trauma or something that a baby's born with. There are so many other things that are higher priorities that are getting a look in that there seems to be a huge backlog that's getting worse and worse.
Getting worse.
And worse.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And so, yeah, absolutely. And I think we've made headway here. I mean, right now, next door, we've got an NHS list going on.
Yeah.
Or it's not strictly speaking an NHS list. It's patients that have been handed over by the NHS to us privately, and we take on their care and manage it as if they would have had the same thing done in the NHS. I think that's going to be absolutely more and more.
So do I. And I think it's a good thing. You know, I mean, it's a good patient experience.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. And if that's where you're getting the waiting list down, I mean, as long as it's not just for political reasons, it's for reasons of healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to say that you've got to do it properly. For example, you know, I could very easily, as an NHS surgeon, start going slow in the NHS, build up my waiting list, and hey, bring them to my hospital here in Battersea. So we've been very, you know, and I think people should be very, very careful, very clear about, you know, conflicts of interest. I've done none of the negotiating when it came to the tariffs and all the rest of it. I've left that to my partners.
Yeah, I think that's the right way.
And similarly, when it came to the eye surgery, our ophthalmology partner, Robbie Walker, he hasn't been involved in that directly. We've done it. We've tried to stay as clean and as open as we can. But I think that's going to become more and more of a thing for places like this. And I honestly, I mean, I'm probably sounding evangelical nowadays when it comes to building a hospital, but having done this place, and we've been open almost 2 years to the day.
Yes, I know.
I think your little operation in this room was almost 2 years ago.
Indeed, it was.
And I'm glad to see you've healed.
Perfectly fine.
But I think I would encourage all of my colleagues, you know, I really would. I think every plastic surgeon in the UK who is properly trained, who is you know, in any way kind of feels that they can take on something a little bit beyond the day-to-day doctoring, I really think they should do it, honestly.
I mean, I'm not just saying I agree because this is what we do, but what's been interesting is that, I mean, when I started 25 years ago, almost every surgeon was an island. You know, they had their own practice, they looked after themselves. There was a lot of, not mistrust of colleagues, but there wasn't much desire to sort of form groups and to move forward with the groups in mind, which was quite different in other specialties, you know, because in the insurance side, we saw quite large groups for urology, anaesthesia all the time, orthopedics and so on. I mean, probably because they're not directly competing with each other. Your shoulder surgeon's not competing with your hip or your knee. But nevertheless, it was far more inclusive, I think it's fair to say, in other specialties. We've seen a shift in that, you know, because it's pretty rare now we get a call from a plastic surgeon who's on their own. Even though our first 3 projects were all lone plastic surgeons. And we saw the strain and the stress on them, not just financially, but with the fact that a venue like this is completely new. And then we started seeing groups, small groups, and now some larger groups. And we're more comfortable with that because we know what's involved. I mean, we have actually actively dissuaded a few surgeons from doing it.
I am the only plastic surgeon that was involved in this build. And I went in, I deliberately didn't go into partnership with another plastic surgeon, mainly because I thought I'd never agree on what colour hats to buy, you know, or what colour gloves or what type of stitch. We'd be arguing over the smallest things because no two plastic surgeons, we don't do anything the same. We're all, I guess it's like chefs.
I guess,
you know, no two chefs will cook an omelette the same way. And they'll all have, and their way is the best, obviously. So I deliberately didn't involve another plastic surgery colleague. Instead, you know, ophthalmologist, anaesthetist, a physician, and businessmen, the landlord.
But I think,
how's that going?
I think you're a blueprint in many ways because I think, you know, we've been through 1 or 2 fairly tough times in plastic surgery with various issues with implants normally, or an ALCL, and you know, these things are potentially a disaster for plastic surgery. So what you've done here is to spread your risk, you know, by including other specialties directly from the outset who invested in the place. who are completely bought into the place financially and in other ways, it spreads your risk. It also opens it up to a lot more colleagues. If you just built a place purely for plastics, you're limited to the plastic surgeons that are in the locale.
But what about working? The bit I'm curious about is working with more than one plastic surgeon. How's that been? Don't name names here, please.
Do you know what? It's, the ones that we've done, they've clearly chosen their partners wisely.
Yeah.
We've not really been aware of or involved in any internal conflict. Yeah. And as you know, we get to know our clients really well, because none of these projects are a few months long. Every single one we've done of any size has been a year plus. So we spent a lot of time together. We got to know each other well. I've got to know the surgeons that have been involved in the multiple surgical venues as well. And there's no sign of cracks. There's no sign of we got into this and actually we found out we don't like each other. Okay. So I think the choices of partner at the start have been particularly good.
No, that's good to
It
hear.
is good.
I think that's really good to hear, actually, because I've always worried about that within us as a specialty, for exactly as you've said, because plastic surgeons have traditionally seen each other, I think, as competition, a threat. There's a lot of don't copy my homework going on. And I think that's the other thing that I'm always trying to push my colleagues and the new guys coming through is, please don't start fighting each other.
No.
Don't start.
No.
Because the trouble is, plastic surgeons, actually, we're selected from a very competitive type A sort of group.
Yeah.
And so the natural thing to do from the word go is to start competing with each other.
Yeah.
Even the juniors, you can see them, dog eat dog type of competition going on.
Yeah.
And I'm forever trying to get them to calm down and play nicely. And I think if we can, as a specialty, because we've got, I always say, look, the threats to our specialty and our patients are not from within
Correct.
the same room
totally
that all the plastic surgeons live in. The main threat to our patients, the public, the people that we're trying to protect and look after properly because we're properly trained and insured and work out of the proper places and members of all the right societies with all the right qualifications, etc. What we're trying to do is do it properly, not necessarily the cheapest, but we're trying to do it the best,
right way.
most high quality way possible. And actually, our biggest threat to all of that is outside the room. There are so many cowboys and all sorts of dodgy setups out there that's who we should be looking at. I think we should be outward facing as a specialty, is what I've always gone on about. And it's really great to hear with the way things are coming through. That's really encouraging.
It's a definite change. It's a definite change. And I think as well, we're starting to see people specialise a little bit more, like the orthopaedic guys do. Because going back to my insurance head, it was always pretty obvious to us that the surgeons that had the higher proportion of claims, not necessarily the largest claims, but the higher number of claims, were the ones that did everything. Yeah. So they do face, they do abdominal, they do lifts, they do lipo, they do breast. Of course, surgeons are extremely well trained on all of those procedures, but you've got to be unbelievably good to be really good at absolutely everything that you do. Yeah. So we saw more claims coming from the surgeons that had a very, very broad practice, whereas the guys that were just doing, well, like Patrick, for example, he's very, very niche in what he does in terms of the breadth of his procedures. It's reflected in their claims histories. And that fosters then the group mentality. Well, I'll do that section, you do that section, and together we do a complementary service. So I'm seeing a lot of differences. So probably the last 5 or 6 years, I would say. Yeah,
no, I think that's really encouraging to
more
hear.
Than the previous 20.
And again, I think we should be encouraging that. I think more and more clinics such as the ones you're building need to spring up all over the UK, all over Europe. The world.
Well, we're following the American model in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's not just follow America. We're almost being pushed down that road. But
so if we can come on to this build, okay, because that's what you and I, we spent it wasn't actually that long. I was surprised how quickly we
actual build. No,
because I think the first nail, as it were, went in August.
I think it was a little bit later actually. I thought we had possession in September.
Maybe it was September, and then the first general anaesthetic was in March. Yeah. And that, it was a ready-made building. Yes, fine. But what do you remember about this build? How, talk me through your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, in every build we've ever done, we've learnt something. Yeah. And, sometimes the learning experience is painful, sometimes it's not. Yours wasn't particularly. We did a lot of amends in yours at the start, which is definitely the time to do it. So I think we did about 24 layouts.
God, yeah.
And we just refined it and refined it and refined it. But that's the thing to do. It's that one of the things that we learned, I think, from yours was the amount of planning we did before is 100% the way to go.
Yeah.
Surgeons, I think, like all of us, once they make that decision to do something like this, they want to get going.
Yeah.
And we're now holding people back, saying, look, we know you want to get going, but believe me, if you try and do it on the hoof, it does cause problems.
And you'll waste a lot of money as well doing so.
You waste money and you waste time.
Because we found, I think timeline-wise, I think I phoned you up August 2021.
Yes.
And we came and we looked at 4 or 5 properties around here. This one was the clear winner in my head. It was. I mean, I know this area. And I'd already seen it on the pictures, thinking, you know what, that one, mate, it's a location.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it was the best location, and we had a few viewings around about August 21.
Yep.
But it wasn't until September 2022 that we actually signed the lease, and we got lucky with that because the place was still available. And we employed our first staff, and the builders moved in. And our 2 staff, Carolina and Jason, our senior operational manager and our senior clinical manager, they were here on site, wrapped up in coats outside in that little archway, freezing.
Building furniture.
Exactly.
But that's typical, really, because a year and then 6 months is really the way it should be. It's all in the preparation.
Absolutely.
So much you can get wrong with these, and you don't want to get them wrong when you're building them. You want to get it wrong before you build it.
And we spent very little money in that first year.
Which is how it should be.
Yeah, exactly. And we could still pull out without losing it all.
Till you sign that lease, you have an exit door.
Exactly.
And we very much encourage everyone. The ones that we worry about are the ones that ring us up and go, right, I've got my venue, I've signed the lease yesterday.
Yeah.
It's like, oh Lord. And we just hope that they've got a long rent-free period. They've got a venue that's easy to fit out. A venue that's actually suitable for what they want.
The licensing.
It isn't always.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, some of them arrive and they have to do a change of use.
Now, tell me quickly about that, actually, because I have to say that this building was suitable from day one. Was it Class E or something?
The rules changed. They changed in September 21, I think it was.
Yeah, I think around about the time we were looking. Yeah,
and it's made my job a whole lot easier because medical
and
used to be
D1. Is that retrospective to older buildings as well?
They've all been thrown in. So anything that was D1, which was medical, so it's most of Harley Street and surrounding areas, has been thrown into a much, much, much broader category, which is E category. Now, E covers things like offices, retail, and so on. So D1 doesn't exist anymore. C does, which is hospital, which is overnights. So if you're 23-hour daycare,
which is what we are here,
you fall into E category. The minute you go consistent overnight care, then you fall into the C category, and that is much, much less prevalent and much less common. But for venues like yours, pretty much every if I walked 100 yards from here, pretty much every single building will be E-class.
Suitable,
So ones that were not D1 use before are now fair game. So it makes my life so much easier because you haven't got that element of risk with the landlord saying no or the planning authorities saying no to a building that looks perfectly suitable. So when we do property searches now, we're getting 100 suitable rather than 5.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's so much easier.
And this was an empty, never been used before, open plan office space. The only bit that was here was the kitchen and the toilets. So if you, again, I'll let you speak, because I know this story as it were because we did it together. But so so can you talk me through? You said it wasn't too painful. But what do you see as being the main hurdles? I'm trying to what I'm trying to get out of this is for those who are watching, thinking about doing this. What should they be looking out for?
The challenge is to the very first thing you need to assess is whether the building is suitable for what you want to do. And I think we spent a long time sitting down going, right, we want X number of consulting rooms. We have to have Y number of theatres. Now, that's sometimes a difficult calculation because as much as surgeons might know that I think this theatre is 34 metres squared, it's the ancillary rooms that are the problem. How much space do you need for changing, how much space you need for staff facilities, how much space you need for treatment rooms. And people always forget, corridors. When we space plan, we take the figure and we add on 20-25% because you have to have corridors, but people forget that.
And waiting area, that's the other thing.
Waiting area, exactly.
So
it's arguably dead space, but you've got to have it.
Yeah, this place, we just turned the corridors all into waiting areas. We're making them
it's a very efficient use of space, this place, actually. I think the corridor percentage was something like 16%, which is really low.
Wow.
Really low.
I think we're helped because this building is such an odd shape.
It does help. It does help because you can't do a circular flow in here. So it had to be sort of one way out, one way back. The ones where you get more corridor space are the ones where you get a circular flow, which are great, but you do use up more space. So I think the size of building is critical. I think the services you're going to put in it. You had a very clear direction quite early on that we were going to go down the road of ophthalmology, and as you know, the recovery pathway for an ophthalmology patient after a cataract is completely different to a surgical patient after a breast aug. So you've got to have a very clear idea of what you're going to do with it. The big considerations that we always look for when we're asked to look at property, and believe me, we would much rather be in at the start before a decision has been made on a property, is the real technical stuff like the medical gases. Like the height of the room, just to get in services like the lights or the air handling. I mean, we're sitting under a light here that is probably, I think, 2.93 metres from the floor. Now, if you get a building that's only 2.4 high, you're really restricted. You're hitting your heads on the lights, as simple as that. So the medical gases here was one of the challenges, and I think the fact that we had a very accommodating landlord, so that we literally we managed to beg some extra space for them, didn't we? And they're actually a very nice little setup downstairs. But not all landlords want them inside. So we've had a number of projects where the landlord has gone, they look like bombs to me, I don't want them in the building. And you and I know that the only risk to these cylinders is when if they fall and fracture, that they do go off. But they're not a bomb, it's not nitrous, it's not risky in that respect. But it's the landlord's insurance that's causing the problem. So there's a number of, in fact, all the recent projects we've done, we've had to site the medical gases outside. Now that is a different thought process to looking at whether the building's suitable.
I mean, for me, it was with the gases, again, I don't know, I'm guessing you'd want to convince others to potentially think about putting them inside. But for me, it was, actually, we've got, theatres are on the go. The alarm goes off. Because the cylinder's running low, that happens every now and again. And your staff that are in scrubs, have to put a high-vis jacket on, but hopefully not have to run across a field.
Totally agree.
To change the cylinders, and then patients asleep on the table in the meantime, and all the rest of it. Well, it doesn't quite happen that way, obviously.
Yours is a near perfect setup because if the actual HTM says that they should be in a self-contained room near an exit door. That's exactly what yours are. So for delivery purposes, it's great. But the fact that it's indoor, you're absolutely right, for weather purposes, it's great. But if
we have a separate storage area, so so there's only so many we can fit into this area, this cupboard, as it were, and you've got to have spare as well. But we also have extra storage in our archway, which we got lucky with.
But that setup, which we obviously thought through at the time, I think we earmarked that for gases very early on because it was so perfect.
And the gases here, for example, they run from one end of the building downstairs to the opposite end of the building.
They come upstairs. A long way.
Was that an issue in itself?
No, I mean, you don't lose efficiency of the delivery. It's more expensive because you're buying a lot more copper piping, and I have to say, costs since we did this have gone up so much. You did it at a good time. I mean, you know what yours cost, but there's not a chance they could do it for anywhere near that right now. It's I think we've hit COVID, we've hit the Ukrainian war, and literally everything has gone up. We can see that some people are just shamelessly profiteering, but what do you do?
Well, that's the way it is.
It is, So that was one of the challenges here, but with a very, very tidy solution. I think part of our job is to find solutions to problems. That's what we're there for.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other big issue that I remember with this place was backup power.
Yes.
We'd kind of forgotten about that, or we didn't think it was needed to that degree.
Well, I think that the difficulty we have in doing what we do, and with the builder partners that we have as well, is we're not building NHS hospitals. So when we sit down with you guys, it's not for us to dictate to you what you need. So I remember the conversation. How much backup power do you need, and to what services to get you out of an operation safely? And we worked it out on the basis of that. If we were going to build a hospital to the standard of a HM, in other words, an NHS hospital, we'd have banks of batteries and we'd have a generator that would kick in and
we wouldn't be able to fit it in. We wouldn't be able to fit a hospital in here.
That's the problem. Yeah. And the cost would be literally double because those systems are so expensive. So when we engage people like the electrical consultants that we did for here as well, there are areas that are they're not mandated. They're advised, they're guidelines and so on. And it's been really tough, I think, for the last 3 years because they've not been in for very long, these rules, to sort of guide our people, guide our clients through them as best as we can. Here you've got battery backup and you've got separate power supply, which is an IPS that comes into the building and spreads the load through the building. Yeah. But it is a challenge because more and more we're seeing that people want more backup time, they want more systems on them, more rooms on them, more recovery areas on them.
So tell me about IPS, UPS.
UPS is basically a big battery that backs it up. Yeah. And IPS, as I understand it, is like a load spreader. Yeah. So your blue sockets that you may be able to see behind me here, these sockets are backed up, so they're all earthed. So if a charge comes through the socket and you have something plugged into that, the patient and it's attached to the patient is not going to get an electric shock delivered to them. So it stops that risk. So Group 2 really applies to anywhere where there is anything electrical attached to the patient. So that would be monitoring. Yeah. It could be the biz. It could be just your standard monitoring through your operation. Yeah. So that's what the IPS is designed to do. The UPS is basically your battery backup, so it's a big bank of batteries.
If the electricity fails,
exactly, kicks in quicker than you'll notice.
And we have to be able to carry on as business as usual in theatre for how long?
You're backed up here for probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and that would depend on what load was going into the sockets at the time. Yeah. So if you have both theatres running, particularly Robbie's kit in here, the ophthalmology stuff, which is quite chunky, you probably get about an hour and a half. Yeah. If you were here on your own, you might
get close to 3. That's not mandated either, is it? This is all guidance stuff, isn't it?
You have to have backup systems in a Group 2 environment. Yeah. So a Group 2 is the definition that I gave there. So we have had 1 or 2 clients that have gone, do I really have to have it? And we said, you do. Yeah. Yes, you do.
Yeah, I think I said
that's mandated.
Because our batteries end up taking up a whole load of space storage. In London, we need storage, and we had to lose a whole load of that to put these big, they're like massive fridges.
They are about the size of a fridge, and in Boreham Wood, we've got 4 rooms of them. Wow. And we were borrowing storage space back for the batteries and everything else because there's some things in these builds you simply can't. Yeah. You wouldn't want to avoid them, and even if you could,
and I think it also gets because no one's really sure about the rules at the moment. The CQC, for example, could suddenly kick in and say, "Hang on a minute, aren't we meant to have, a bit more battery backup?" And you got to go, "No." And it's fine. It might be that they're wrong. The CQC turns out to have got it wrong because they didn't quite understand it correctly. Yeah. Or perhaps we got it, but that delay that it adds to your build is significant in terms of cost. I remember there was a clinic in West London, wasn't there, which was ready to open.
Yes.
And I think at some point they were literally about to welcome their first patients in, but they hadn't. I think the flooring hadn't been done correctly, and there were a few other bits and pieces. Yep. And I think that virtually broke them, if I'm not mistaken.
Wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah, I think because they were incurring all the costs. At that point.
And so I think the planning, as you said, coming back to that, it's like wallpapering, isn't it? It's all in the preparation.
Of course it is. Yeah. I mean, if you remember, every layout we did, we ran through a CQC consultant because there's no point at all in us doing exactly that pathway you've just said there, where you go through, you build it, you think it's great, CQC come along and say you can't open because that's catastrophic.
So actually, let's talk about CQC next. And by the way, if we haven't covered enough of whatever topic for whoever's watching us trying to learn how to build a hospital, which I'm hoping we're kind of helping them do, get in touch, I guess, with you or with
by
me.
Means,
we'll have links and stuff and emails. So CQC, let's talk about that. So we had a great guy as our CQC advisor. I don't know whether you work with him anymore, but he happens to be a plastic surgeon, had done a fellowship with the CQC prior to finishing his training. Alex Armstrong, not Alexander, Alex Armstrong, not the comedian. So tell me about CQC, Alex.
Well, I mean, touch wood. What we found in the build, which has surprised us to some degree, is the CQC questions about the physical build and the whole makeup of the building are far less intrusive and invasive than we thought they were going to be. They seem to be focusing on the policies and the procedures and everything that you have in place to make sure that what we've built is run properly. That said, we would never ever assume we're going to fly through, because the day you do that is the day you let your guard down, you make a mistake. So what we always do is we run every single layout by a CQC consultant. If there's any possibility we're not sure about something, we work with 2 CQC consultants at the moment. If there's any chance we're not quite sure, we would just ring them up. I'll give an example. We're just building a very small unit, and one of the queries was, do the little trolleys that we're putting into the A&E have to have side rails, because they're only doing local anaesthesia and so on. I sort of assumed I knew the answer, but I thought I better check, because we can't lead a client down the wrong road. So the problem we're finding with CQC is, and it's inevitable really between all the inspectors, is a little bit of inconsistency, which makes it even more difficult because you're trying to almost second guess.
I think it's interesting, actually. I think the inspectors that we had, I mean, first of all, we had a virtual
we did
inspection.
Wander around with an iPad, wasn't it?
Exactly. And we were told, yes, fine, tick, you can open. And then it wasn't that long, actually. It was surprisingly quick that they turned up.
I think it was about 7 working days, wasn't it? Do you mean for the inspection?
No, for the inspection.
Oh, sorry, sorry.
No, the actual, they turned up for their big inspection within a year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that is quick.
I think it was.
That's
maybe
quick.
it's just over. I might have got it wrong. But that was where you get, they go around.
They go around with a
They go around
comb,
looking at things and running their fingers along surfaces and interviewing staff. And actually, you're right. It was all about policy, and it was much more about our paperwork in a way, rather than looking at whether we had the right power supplies or whether we had the right battery backup or whether our gases were okay. All the things that we've just been talking about that we worry about technically actually didn't turn out to be that big a deal to the CQC inspectors. And the interesting thing also was that the CQC inspectors that came along, and they're really nice, by the way, don't be scared of them.
No.
They were very friendly. They were trying to help you. It's like exams, you're always told that they're trying to help you pass. They were. But interestingly, they had now merged with the GP inspectors, had merged with the small hospital inspectors or something. And so we actually had 2 people that we were the first hospital or clinic, as it were, that they'd ever inspected.
That's exactly what we had with Patrick's. I remember the guy that did Patrick's, he did a lot of care homes. And he did tell us this was the first operating theatre that he'd been into. So we'd spent hours and hours getting everything absolutely bang on, prepping the theatre manager that we had, and we were proper geared up to go. And he wandered around, said, "This looks amazing," and wandered out, and we were like, "What happened there?" And then they grilled Patrick for 4 hours on the policies.
I think I was operating when our inspector just put their head through the door and said, "Yeah, we've already been in the other room. It's fine." Okay. So I think CQC is not as daunting. I mean, the other thing that you were not necessarily directly involved with was controlled drugs, which I'll just mention whilst we're talking about it. That took a while, and I think
that is very difficult to do.
Yeah, and again, I think, I don't know, but it feels like we got lucky with this build, because we applied for CQC early, which I think is a good idea. We applied for controlled drugs probably way too early, but I think that wasn't a bad idea.
The problems we're finding, sorry to interrupt, we're finding with CQC and controlled drugs is CQC have gone in sort of 3 stages. The stage they're at now is if you're not ready for them to inspect you when you reach the top of the pile, they'll put you right to the bottom of the pile. Now, the problem with that is you could be 2 weeks away from being ready. Then all of a sudden you're 12 weeks away from them coming back. So you've got this 10-week disaster of sitting in a beautifully finished room. So you've really got to time it. One of the ones that we did, I think it was Adnova we did in Portsmouth, that was the best process for us, because the way it worked there was we rang them and said, right, we're about 2 weeks behind schedule. And they basically said, just ring us back when you're ready, which is fantastic. That was far easier to manage.
They've changed now, have they?
They have changed now than going down the first road. Controlled drugs is...
It's a bit random,
totally random at the moment.
But again, I think it just, as soon as we got a mobile number, I think we just end up hassling people, and it seemed to work. Actually,
it can be that you just shout a bit louder than the others, and you get through.
That did seem to help, and we at the time as well, we were looking to help out with some skin cancer work potentially.
I think that
so
helps.
we use that as
Yeah,
that was a good
yeah.
little bit of pressure that you can apply.
But some of the challenges with these builds is the timing. It's when do you do this? When do you do that?
Yeah.
You know, even hiring staff. You know, the really good staff might be on a 3-month notice period. You know, that assumes you find someone exactly when you want to, and they haven't got holidays and so on. So, one of the things that I think we do quite well is we make sure we don't forget anything, and it lags behind because. If you get it wrong, as we said a minute ago, you could literally end up ready to go, but for that one important piece that we've just forgotten about, you can't carry on.
So I was going to try and now come on to some sort of general things in terms of let's talk about your future, the future for the clinic builders, as well as potentially how you would see the future for other people like me or Robbie or or the other partners who are thinking about doing this. So. Is there anything, before we do that, I'm trying to do this without notes. Have I left anything out that we really should talk about?
I don't think so. I think that the real thing we'd stress again is the planning.
Yeah.
And I do mean even before you get to the stage, you know, we do a lot of hour-long conversations where we run through what's involved, potential expense, which is always more than people think, timeframes, stress.
Yeah.
You know, you yourself, I mean, we were meeting here at 7, 8 o'clock sometimes after you were finishing work. You know, it is a drain on your personal time.
Yeah.
You know, you fit it around an already busy environment that you're in. So we've probably scared a lot of people off it. But
it is you've got to be prepared for hard work and long hours and running around a lot. You know, I was still very much full-time NHS and trying to still maintain my private practice because that's what's paying for it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think so. Yeah, I guess let's where do we go from here? Is the next thing I wanted to talk to you about. So what does the future hold? Let's start off with you, for you and the clinic builders. Well,
I mean, we fully should ask because we're literally taking on another project manager. You know, we're getting more and more calls every week. We know that if we get 10 calls, 3 might actually come to a live project for whatever reason, but. You know, we're very hands-on, as you know. You know, we spend a lot of time on these projects. What we don't want to do is water ourselves down to the point where people are saying, well, where have you been for the last week? That'd be a personal disaster for me. So we're bringing on another project manager who will probably do some of the smaller ones, the ones with minor ops or just treatment rooms that probably don't need the technical expertise that I've got. That's not to say we won't teach them, but they can cut the teeth on the smaller ones where there's less technical knowledge involved. The direction we see it travelling in is it's just going to get more. I don't think the NHS issue is going to go away. I think the more people do it, the more people think, well, I should be doing that as well. There is an element of a sheep mentality to some degree.
Absolutely.
And it's a cautious approach. You know, surgeons inherently are cautious by nature, which is a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So when pioneers like yourself take the jump, other people take note. And over time, then they're the ones to follow suit.
And do you see the future being in plastics or plastics and something else or other specialties?
I see it in all 3.
Yeah.
We're suddenly starting to get calls from orthopedics, ophthalmology, purely those specialties that see an opportunity to mop up NHS stuff.
And if a plastic surgeon was looking to partner up with another specialty, what do you think we should look to? Which other specialties would you recommend we work with? Because we've done ophthalmology here, which I have to say works really nicely.
I think ophthalmology is a good one. I think we felt that right from the start. I mean, I think it's got to have a footprint that can be brought in. You know, I always used to think gynecology was a good one, but it's got to have a very good private practice to bring along. It's not. It's probably not as good as I thought it was a couple of years ago. Yeah. Orthopedics, I think, can work very, very well. Yeah. The insurance companies seem a lot more open to taking on venues as well at the moment, which opens up the whole insured work. Yeah. And there's other specialties like ENT. Yeah.
Vascular, maybe, the simpler vascular stuff.
Yeah, the stuff that is done under day case, and even things that have been delisted, like, varicose veins is a big one now in the private sector. So I don't think there's a perfect one, but I think if in order of preference, I think ophthalmology is a very good one. I think orthopedics with the right people. Yeah. And then the smaller specialties, if you wish, in private practice, like ENT.
And so, let's. I'm trying to keep this vaguely to time. If you were going to give a new plastic surgeon advice
Yeah.
who's kind of watching us having done it or watching others who have done it, what would you say to them?
Don't do it on your own, and that's not a shameless plug. Do it with us, because I'm sure there's other people that can help as well. But for all the mistakes that we've made, don't make them yourself, because they can be witheringly expensive. Look into it with enormous detail, because as we said a while ago, until you sign that lease or buy that building, you have a get out. So you need to pick that pen up knowing everything that's involved and do it 10 times over. So it is very challenging. Look, it can be extremely rewarding as well, as I'm hoping you'd feel this place has been for you. And it's the nest egg for the future. I've seen so many surgeons retire and just stop practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And have nothing to sell or to pass on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I echo that. I think don't do it alone. I would say, find other partners to do it with, because you don't have the time to do it on your own. I think that's really tough. And I'd also say don't necessarily do it straight away as soon as you come out of the gates as a consultant.
Oh, yeah.
I think, learn your trade with your NHS practice, build up your own private practice. Even if you've got the money, careful, don't just go spending it, because you'll probably waste an awful lot. Yeah, I think take your time.
Yeah.
And then what would you say, if you're starting all over again, if you're talking to the 1998 Gary, we won't talk about your age, but Gary in 1998, what would you say to him?
I gotta be honest, there's not a lot of change. I've been really lucky. I've been with a big bosom of a company that looked after me and helped me develop, and then I took the plunge into working for myself. I love this industry. I absolutely love this industry. I'm well known in it. I know a lot of people in it, and the quality of people in this industry never ceases to amaze me. And I am talking about surgeons, but I'm also talking about some of the companies that are in this space as well. We're in a little WhatsApp group. We call it the Medical Stalwarts, and it's a group of companies that have been around a very long time, and the knowledge and the camaraderie in there is fantastic. So it is a small industry where everyone seems to know everybody else and arguably their business, but there's a lot of positivity about it. So I'm not sure I changed much, to be quite honest. Maybe should have got a project manager a bit earlier.
That's good to hear. No, I mean that sounds like a life well spent, a career well spent as well. And
I enjoy my job. I mean, how many people? So many people don't enjoy the job, and I love it. And I'm away from home a lot, and I work hard, but it's because I do enjoy it.
Absolutely. I think I'd say the same as well, actually. I think, and I think in a way your story of having started off working for a company that helped you grow and learn, I think the NHS for us plastic surgeons is a good place to start. Yeah. And then working for yourself is probably where we tend to branch out by doing a bit of private as well as NHS, so we don't have to choose one or the other. Yeah. That's also quite nice. So I think that's a good place to then go on to, and then perhaps think about spreading your wings into a place like this. Yeah, but what I would say is, do it. I guess is that the same thing?
It's very easy to say, don't have any regrets, live life and everything else. And I think as long as you do it in a measured way, then there's nothing to fear. I mean, you mentioned about CQC. Everyone's terrified of CQC. Yeah. I'm actually the registered manager at Boreham Wood at Maidenhead, because I felt that I couldn't really advise people unless I really understood it. So I volunteered to be the registered manager. And it has been tough and it has been a challenge, but I can now at least speak with a bit of authority on it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great.
But it wasn't as scary as I thought.
I think that's the thing. It isn't as scary, I think. I mean, I know you've said it is more expensive, but actually for me it didn't feel like it was as expensive as I thought it was going to be. And it was a lot quicker, actually. That's what I do remember. Yeah. I think we did get there a lot faster than I thought. So I would encourage people to do it. Yeah, I think should we draw it to a close? I think we've done well. We've been talking for 50 minutes.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I think we've done well. So, but thank you very much for coming. All the way down here, perhaps we can have a follow up once you've done a few more projects.
Of course, anytime you want.
And because this is an ever changing field.
Very.
I'll probably need an update by then anyway.
That's fine.
So, but thank you very, very much for coming.
My pleasure.
Cheers.
Thanks, Naveen.
And thanks for watching.